This video is a short snippet from a discussion between Coach Dalton and I for the Flex Success Research Review, and we're discussing a paper on sugar. So if you've ever wondered whether sugar is good or bad, and what are the effects of consuming sugar, how much is too much, is fruit okay, all these questions will be addressed in this video.
Hi guys, so today Dalton and I are going to be discussing a really interesting paper on added sugars and specifically added sugar consumption and chronic disease risk factors. Now this is probably one of the best papers on sugar that I've read. It was very comprehensive, but it's also very well written. So if you're new to reading research, I would really recommend starting with a paper like this because it's quite easy to understand. They go into a lot of detail and obviously it's on a very interesting and controversial subject. So the consumption of added sugars is controversial for many reasons. People have misinterpreted the data that we've seen so far, mostly in animal studies, and they've tried to extrapolate these results to humans, and this has led to the demonization of added sugars, which is an issue, and we'll discuss why. So this review looked at systematic reviews, meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials to provide an overview of the current evidence in relation to added sugars and health considerations. And the conclusion of the paper was that singling out added sugars as a unique culprit for metabolically based diseases like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, it's inconsistent with the current evidence. And that's usually the message that we're portrayed. So we're going to go into the details now about why you don't have to be so scared of sugar unnecessarily. So the paper was good for many reasons, but one of the reasons it talks about these controversies related to added sugars. So we're going to go through those now, starting with the metabolism of fructose related sugars, which Dalton will discuss.
So one of the big things that is always implicated around anywhere we talk about added sugars, it's always fructose, whether it be high fructose corn syrup found in soft drinks, not the artificial ones, but actual soft drinks, or if it's in fruits, just normal base fructose levels coming from fruits, or if it's isolated completely away from a food source and just taken in by itself as a sugar. Now, fructose works a little bit differently than glucose inside of our body. When we ingest it and digest it, it gets absorbed, and there is a massive difference to how it's broken down. We get almost 50% sent to the liver where it is converted into glucose, which is important because then it is able to provide substrates for fuels for a lot of cells around the body. You get a small portion that is converted in the liver into fat, small, tiny portion. And then you get some portion that is metabolized off as energy at the time for some cells to use. And then you get some excreted out of the body as carbon dioxide. That's the general pathways for metabolism for high fructose corn syrup. Now, the reason that's important is because the amounts of fructose that is actually coming from, say, sodas, for as an example, or diet drinks, soft drinks, sorry, is a ratio of either 44 or 55%, depending on the high fructose corn syrup number. And you can generally find them on the websites or the companies that will indicate their nutritional information as to what percentage of sugar that fructose component consists of. Now that's important because it changes up and down the levels a little bit, but when you look at the overall amount of carbohydrates that are coming in, a ratio of that 44 or 55%, depending on the code that you get, will be high fructose corn syrup. Now, higher amounts of fructose do push up over time into us metabolizing more fructose in the liver. However, in the context of our actual diet and what goes on, remember, it always comes down to calories being king and dictating what is and isn't going to happen over time. We're not always interested in just the mechanism of the snap action that happens right after we ingest fructose, but the 1 hour to 24 hours afterwards that impact has and what we do with it. Now, the reason that's important is because, like I said before, calories dictate our results. So if you are eating at a maintenance level of calories, irregardless of how much fructose you consume, your body actually finds a way to navigate fuels up and down. So increasing carbohydrate burning or decreasing lipid burning decrease in ketones as well, so that you have an equalization, an equilibrium almost, of fuels being burnt so that the body maintains its weight. Now, if you're in a deficit or if you're in a surplus, then the body will tier and those fuel systems up or down so that we get relative fat gain, muscle gain, or fat loss or muscle loss. Calories aside, we then get the metabolism which happens. And as I mentioned before, 50% of fructose actually gets converted into glucose. So the scary warnings and anecdotes that people talk about with fructose consumption having a bad impact on body composition or a bad impact on health, triglycerides, whatever, then misunderstanding that straight away 50% of the fructose that's coming in gets converted. There's a small conversion in the liver at the time, and there's a small amount that's excreted. At the end of the day, for humans, the process of de novo lipogenesis, or a DNL, which you might see in the literature, which literally just means the creation of fat from substrates. That process happens from fructose at less than 5% in humans, in healthy humans. Now, in overweight and obese people, it can tier up a little bit, but it's never actually as high as we find in animal models, which you can see rats, for example, having somewhere up to 50% from that if the fructose consumption is really high. So with that being aside, we've only got less than 5% of the metabolism from fructose coming in, being converted and possibly stored as fat within the liver. We've got 50% being converted into glucose, which is being used for different cellular activities. A small amount being converted into carbon dioxide and being excreted. So it's actually nowhere near as harmful or, negatively healthy, because the amounts that you're actually consuming versus what comes down through the metabolism chain and where it gets stored is actually much, much lower. Most people have health warnings or health risks at anywhere from 20 grams of fructose a day through to hundreds of grams of fructose a day. It would all come down to how much you could actually consume to get that from either soft drinks or fruits. Now, if we talk about it from where it would come from fruits, it's actually a lot smaller than high fructose corn syrup. We're talking in the range of a couple of grams max from the high sugar based fruits down to less than half a gram for the lower base, such as like strawberries and watermelon. So people hear fructose, they generally associate it with these negative news headlines that they've seen or heard about. They think it's a bad thing for our body composition, and therefore start looking at fruit as being bad for our body composition or life in general, because it has a composition. And then they're kind of missing the forest for the trees. Remember that fruits like strawberry and watermelon, like I mentioned before, are also high sources of fiber and micronutrients as well. Strawberries have like 52 milligrams of vitamin C. Oranges have something like 60 milligrams of vitamin C, so that's super high sources. You've got watermelon with high sources of magnesium, so you're missing out on really key important micronutrients by viewing fruits as being the devil because of a small composition of one type of sugar that's coming from. I think I got everything that I had down in my head.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very good summary, and exactly, you've highlighted the important issue, whereas people hear this information and take it to mean that they should avoid sugar. And so usually people who are trying to lose weight, when we know that things like berries, strawberries, like you mentioned, are also very low energy density foods, which would be a great choice for someone trying to lose weight. And you don't want to unnecessarily avoid these foods or believe, that consuming fructose is going to in isolation leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, can't say that one, insulin resistance, all these things, because it's just, we know that it based on the data, it's not how it works in humans. And I think that people have taken this pathway and seen how it works in animal studies and try to apply it where it doesn't work the same. That's a good example of where extrapolating the data from these animal studies to humans doesn't really apply in this way. And like you say, you don't want people unnecessarily avoiding fructose and fruit and then missing out on all the nutrients that are contained in fruit. So that's one thing that we can clear up straight away, pretty much. I think that's actually quite common. It's quite shocking, isn't it? The amount of people that still believe that sugar is, that fruits in particular are bad. That's just like mind-blowing almost.
Yeah, I I kind of slap anyone that turns around and tells me that fruit, like to avoid fruit for whatever reason. I actually challenge someone to eat enough fruit to hit enough fructose for them to get unhealthy metabolism, unhealthy health markers without lowering their insulin levels, without controlling blood glucose regulation better, without potentially dropping body weight. It's very hard to overeat fruit. You get to a point where you either go to the bathroom a lot or you burst from your stomach being so full. So it's really doesn't make any sense to me.
Exactly. There's only so much strawberries and watermelon that you can eat in one sitting before you're like, yeah, I'm pretty much done with this. Okay, cool. So now I'll discuss the effects of sugar on body weight and body composition, which I think is quite a big one because, again, it's a very common view that consuming sugar is responsible for weight gain and ultimately, becoming obese. Whereas there's quite a few studies on this now comparing isocaloric diets containing high sugar and low sugar. And they found that when the calories are matched, there is no difference between the amount of weight gained or lost. So there's no benefit from cutting out sugar completely when you're not considering calorie intake. So the studies that have shown, a decrease in sugar, an association between a decrease in sugar and a decrease in body weight, they're not controlled for calories, which we know is the main driver, the thing that's going to influence your rate of fat loss, fat gain the most. So that's a really key point as well. But there is something to note, and that is that high levels of sugar consumption are often associated with excess energy intake. So really, the most important thing is that you are controlling your energy intake. And when these calories are controlled for, higher sugar isn't going to stop you from losing weight. And also, if you're looking to change your diet and the only thing you do is reduce your sugar intake without a consideration of any other factors, it's unlikely to produce any meaningful results unless it results in a calorie deficit. There was also a very good analogy in this paper that I quite liked. It's a Hindu tale about the elephant. So what it was is there's 6 blind men who are all feeling different parts of the elephant. So one person feels the tusk, one person feels the tail, one person feels the body of the elephant, and they're all experiencing something different. But that's all they know. They're blind. That's the only part they can see. And when people blame sugar for weight gain, you are looking at something in isolation and ignoring all of the other factors, like the blind guys touching the elephant. And that's something that's so common in nutritional science. It's just taking one small factor and then blaming that, for, again, like the cause of obesity in this context. And the issue with that is when it comes to treatments for obesity, if we're thinking that added sugars are the sole cause, then we're only going to consider that in our recommendations for how to lose weight. And if you unknowingly target sugar as the main culprit, and that's all you do to address it, cut sugars out of your diet, and you do lose weight because you've reduced your calorie intake. When it comes to maintaining a healthy lifestyle overall, all you're going to know is that, well, cutting out sugars is what helped me lose weight, so therefore I can never eat sugar ever again. And as I say, when looking at the studies, comparing sugar intake and calories as well, when these are matched, we know that it's not the sugar, it's the calories that are influencing body composition. So targeting sugars in isolation, we're not recommending that you go ham on the sugar, but wrongly associating that with changes in body composition is not going to lead to the correct actions and the understanding of why you're doing what you're doing and why your actions are producing your results. And also there was a trial, the Carmen trial, compared, this is quite interesting actually, ad libitum, high complex carbohydrate diet to an ad libitum higher fat control. So they've prescribed them diets, but people eat as much as they want. And they found that both of the diets resulted in lost weight, and there was no significant difference between the ad libitum high sugar diet and the ad libitum high complex carbohydrate diet. So that's quite interesting as well. And another point is that the American Society of Nutrition quite rightly specifically warns against isolating one component of the diet and blaming that for obesity. So like what I'm saying with the elephant and ignoring all other factors, we can't isolate things and extrapolate that to, like, obesity is such a complex disease. It's not going to be down to one thing. And this is something that's so common in like the media. They're responsible for things like this. We've said about the expert opinions who, you know, you've seen like the rise of low sugar products, sugar-free cookbooks and stuff like that. And people see this and they think, a sugar-free cookbook to lose weight. That's where I've been going wrong. I've been eating sugar. So they're responsible for things like this as well. And I just think that sugar is such a sexy topic that people like to, you know, place far too much weight on it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I definitely agree. I think one thing that we can say is, and we kind of danced around it before, those who are consuming a high amount of sugars in their diet typically display a bunch of other behaviors which we see around overconsumption energy consumption being higher than maintenance. So that would be, it's never just high sugar consumption in their diet, it's high fat, high salt, low activity, low exposure, alcohol exposure, tobacco exposure, generally low sleep, potentially even shift working. So we don't see a high sugar consumption by itself and none of the other health risk factors then having a negative impact on health markers at the end.
And that wraps up today's video. I hope you found it useful. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay in the loop with us. And if you want to check out the other cool things that we've got going on, then have a look at the description box. That's also where you'll find us on Facebook and Instagram. Cool. Thanks guys. See you in the next one.